Some people told me they spent 3 hours trying to go from just beyond the Cornice Traverse to the top of the Hillary Step, which should take about half an hour.
If you're enjoying the show and want to take the next step in your training, join our newsletter and receive a free 4-week sample training plan. Head on over to uphillathlete.com/letsgo, and once you sign up, you'll instantly get a link to try out some of our most popular training plans. It's a great way to get a feel for how we train our athletes for big mountain goals. Check it out at uphillathlete.com/letsgo. That's uphillathlete.com/LETSGO.
Welcome to the Uphill Athlete Podcast. With me today to break down the Everest 2026 season is Mr. Alan Arnette, who's been chronicling Everest's seasons for years. He's climbed the mountain himself and works with climbers through his company Summit Coach. And he's also a longtime friend and affiliate of Uphill Athlete. Alan, welcome back.
Thanks a lot for having me, Steve. Appreciate it.
And Martin Zohr, many of you will know as a coach here at Uphill Athlete. He's based in Chamonix, just finishing up with his master's in altitude physiology. And he has been coaching athletes on Everest and other high altitude destinations for a lot of years now. Martin, welcome. Good to have you. So last year, you had given me a few keywords for the season. We were talking about the use of drones was starting to be a topic and a few other things. What were the keywords for the 2026 Everest season? What were the key themes?
Yeah, so the keywords that I'm used in my season summary were quirky, jet stream, skiing, running, trash, records, crowds, and, wait for it, normal.
Normal. Interesting. Why normal?
Well, all the headlines around the world screamed about the delays. I know we're going to get into that, talking about the delays and the ice fall and, the big boulder or the big ice cube in the middle of it. And they all talked about how, even headlines saying, speculating that the Everest season was over and they were going to cancel it. I mean, it was just all over the map. And yes, the ice fall went in 2 weeks late. It went in the latest on record. So, that part was true. But I went back and did a deep analysis. I've done this for years on the Himalayan database, which is, the authority in my mind. So all the figures that you'll hear from me are all subject to being verified by the Himalayan database at some point. But if you look at the history of summits on Everest, on the Nepal side, 80% of the summits, the total summits for the season, occur between May 17th, 18th, and May 23rd. And that's precisely what happened this year. So despite the delays, despite all the drama, despite the jet stream coming and going, it was a normal summit season.
So let's go back and go through the numbers a little bit. How many Everest permits did Nepal issue this year? I think it was a record.
Yeah, it was a record. It broke the 2019 record. It was right at 497. So around 500 permits were issued. And China was the lead country this year with it's up to like 110 permits going to the Chinese. And that's another continuation of a trend that's been going on. India, the United States were the other top three, and that's pretty normal. But Southeast Asia, India, and China has really been the growing demographic for Everest climbers. So we had 500, let's say 500 foreigners. And I always use the ratio, and it's been going up over the years. I've been tracking this closely, of 1.5 support climbers or Sherpas or Tibetans on that side, but we'll get into that because China closed to foreigners. So that's around 750 Sherpas that supported those 500 climbers. That's 1,250 climbers that tried to climb Everest. And then I always take like a 30% attrition rate. And this year it was less than that, surprisingly. And so we had, the last number I saw was 1,008 summits. So it was an absolute record season. And on May 20th, 274 people summited in a 24-hour period. And,
Wow.
we didn't get a lot of data out of that because, bad news stays on the mountain. But I heard and I had 6 summit coach clients on the mountain this year. And so from my network and my moles, I heard there were 12 to 18 hour summit pushes from the South Col to the summit. And some people told me they spent 3 hours trying to go from just beyond the Cornice Traverse to the top of the Hillary Step, which should take about half an hour.
Interesting.
So that was one of my keywords of records and crowds. And that's where that comes from.
So since the Hillary Step has changed form, has that alleviated a bit of a choke point? Does that continue to hold true?
No, it really hasn't, because what it did, it went from being this off with crack that was, it was very climbable. But if you were very inexperienced and you think about the logistics of it, you've got crampons, you've got an oxygen mask on, you've got a hood on, and you're trying to basically do mid-fifth class rock. Yeah, it could be dark, could be mid-fifth class rock climbing. And a lot of people just don't have that experience on Everest. So today I call it the Hillary Slope because it's really a snow slope. And there's really no climbing involved per se. I mean, you can climb it upright attached to the fixed rope, but the rub is basically a cornice. And 2 years ago, that thing was overcrowded, and there were two climbers, a Sherpa, and I think he was from the UK, that were unclipped from the rope. Big no-no, right? And that cornice collapsed. And thankfully, everybody else was saved by being attached to the fixed rope, but those 2 gentlemen lost their lives. So, it may be easier to climb, but it's not any technically safer than it was before.
Okay. And has it helped with the timing and the flow of people pass up and down through that little section?
I believe it's still a single rope. Martin, maybe from your still but I think it's still a single rope because it's not wide enough to put 2 ropes in it. So it's still a bottleneck, especially when you have 200 and, close to 300 people trying to climb it in that short period of time.
So the Tibet-side was closed this year. What happened there?
So nobody really knows except for the officials in Lhasa at the CTMA or maybe in Beijing. There was a rumor going around that there was this fireworks display that was sponsored by Arc'teryx and this famous Chinese pyrotechnic? What is it? Fireworks guy.
Pyrotechnic?
Yeah, there you go. But that they set off this long bridge of fireworks that simulated a dragon. And it was in a sacred area of Tibet, and somebody got upset about it. So they closed Mount Everest in Shishapangma and Choyolyu. Now that makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Yeah, I knew that there was a controversy around that, but I didn't realize that it was connected to Everest because it wasn't in the same place. I mean, it was in Tibet, but interesting. Yeah. Okay. Well,
and it was an outdoor gear company, a Canadian outdoor gear company, Arc'teryx. So no one really knows. I went to a meeting here in Colorado with a lot of Sherpas, and I asked several of them, and they said it was for conservation reasons, but even they don't know. So, again, the mainstream press ran with the fireworks because that was the easiest one to always have every good story has a villain. So this story had a villain. But it did end up that there was a Chinese team that did climb, and I confirmed this with a Chinese national, that there were 28 Chinese nationals, no foreigners, and they were supported by 60 support climbers, of which I assume the vast majority were Tibetans. And 25 of the 28 summited on the Tibetan side, supported by an unknown number. But again, if you go by the 1.5 to 2, I would guess there was, 40, 50. So there were, around 75, 80 summits on the Tibetan side. But really all the action was on the Nepal side. And many Western teams, like Adrian Bollinger's Alpenglow, they were all set to go on the north side, like they always do. And then Adrian has strong ethics about climbing on the south side. He thinks it's too dangerous, primarily for his staff. So, and he's really a big advocate these days of using a helicopter to get to Camp 2, which kind of surprises me a little bit, but he makes the analogy, which is a good one, that on Denali, nobody starts in Talkeetna. Everybody flies to the glacier. So, in his mind, that would be cricket to be able to start from Camp 2 by using helicopters to avoid the ice fall. But I'd estimate maybe 125 people transferred from the Tibetan side to the Nepal side. So it made some difference, 10% difference, but it didn't have a material impact on the records of the crowds.
Okay, yeah. And I would say, with having spent a lot of time in Alaska, that's not really a good analogy, because the reason people don't is it's just simply of how far it is. Like, it's just like the scale.
It could take you a month.
It's not because it's dangerous. It's not because the end of the glacier is a mess at the, bottom of the glacier. It would be hard getting on, and it's going to change every year, of course. But it's also like, I don't know the number of miles it is from, the toe of the glacier up to what we call base camp now. So
right.
I mean, it's got to be 30 miles or something. So, I do know people, pretty routinely go out that way. They take pack rafts and walk out the glacier and then put in at toe of the glacier and float down to Talkeetna. A couple of people do that every year. So anyway, we're getting off topic here. 1,008 total summits, an all-time record. The prior high was 2019 with 891 is what is in my notes. Pretty much all in the South Col. Well, that's the South Col summits, right? And then in addition, there's those North Col climbers.
Right.
So
around 1,100.
So roughly 1,100.
Yeah. 274
people in one day. That's incredible. Okay. So I have 109 Chinese, 77 American, 61 Indian, and 32 from the UK. And roughly 105 women climb Everest this year. So that's all pretty amazing.
Yep.
Nepal collected $8.5 million in mountaineering fees this season. This is kind of related to one of the questions that we asked last year is, around the rules and how they're managing those rules. $8.5 million in a country like Nepal goes a long ways. How is that kind of flowing through to the climbers, to the support staff, and the whole ecosystem? Is any of that seeing the light of day back up in the Khumbu?
There's been talk about that for decades, but to my knowledge, very little, if any, goes back to the villages like a Namche or Parachet or someplace. The one exception are the permits that's paying to the SPCC, the Sagarmatha Pollution Control Committee,
right,
which manages the Icefall doctors, which put in the fixed lines from base camp to Camp 2. And so they are paid and insured through the permit money. But as far as money going to the Sherpas, no, they're paid by their operator. So, a Seven Summits Treks or Madison Mountaineering, they pay their Sherpas directly. So none of that permit money goes back into the ecosystem. It all stays in the government coffers.
Yeah, which, was always a big point of kind of soreness for me as when I was going to the Himalaya frequently. And we have the British to thank for this system, by the way. We could do another podcast about the history of the permit system and why we pay fees to governments to climb mountains in certain countries, but not in others, or not in most, thankfully. So it's an interesting history. So records are the bright headline. There's a human number. There's 5 people who lost their lives on the mountain this season. 5 out of, given some of the death tolls and some of the years past, that's actually doesn't seem too bad. It seems like it was, points to me towards a pretty smooth season. I mean, there's always going to be the odd accident, right? Or somebody's going to have a cardiac arrest somewhere, or, a cornice is going to collapse. These things are somewhat unavoidable when you put that many people in that kind of environment. Well, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. It's always tragic when anybody loses their life on a mountain.
Of course.
But then we had the one gentleman at the very end that self-rescued, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure. But there were 3 Sherpas who died. One, he was a Everest mountain guide, and he died while trekking in. So technically, that wasn't a climbing death; that was a trekking death. And then we had a Sherpa. He was 30. No, he was 20 years old, and he slipped at Camp 3 and fell down to Lhotse face. that has happened before. That's the reason that you always hear people say when Camp 3 is so steep and so slippery. And this year it was pretty dry, so that was hard blue ice. And he didn't have an ice axe, probably wasn't wearing crampons, so he just had no control. And then another gentleman, he died while going from base camp to Camp 1. And then we had two Indians who died. And these two really bother me a lot, obviously for their death, but the circumstances really bother me. They were climbing with Pioneer Adventures, and Pioneer made this public. And they went as far as saying, when they both summited, and one died right at the South Summit, and the other one died at Camp 2. But here's the disturbing part, is that Pioneer said that they were having difficulties on the ascent. So, Martin, I'm sure you coach your clients, and Steve, I know you do too, and I do mine. If you're in trouble on your ascent, turn around, stop. Don't keep going. And this is where the summit fever plays into it. This is where the cultural interactions of Sherpas with non-Sherpas play into it. This is where having proper medical training, at least having some level of wilderness mountain training, medical training, that where a Sherpa can look at you and go, you're stumbling, or, hey, tell me again, what's your name? Where were you born? And if you can't answer these questions, you have some form of altitude sickness. It's probably cerebral edema, maybe pulmonary. Turn around. And if these two young men were suffering going up, they should have been turned around. So that goes in my book, what I call a preventable death. The 51-year-old who died on his way, that's probably was unpreventable. He probably had an aneurysm or a heart attack or something. And that's the contract we signed with the mountain, that, we have something going on in our body that we're not aware of. That's the reason that the best guides will require a complete physical with a stress test for anyone over 50 that goes on the mountains to try to weed out those, those unknown problems. But anyway, in context, 5, historically, it's anywhere from 8 to 10. 4 years ago, we had 18. We had 2 years in a row where we had a total of 26. 23 of those 26 were with budget operators. So, there are lessons that you can glean out every single year. And one of the reasons, I'll just say this quickly, is that I think this year was perhaps lower despite the records, is that people are using higher flows of supplemental oxygen starting at lower camps.
Right.
So today, almost the standard is to run at 2 to 4, starting from Camp 2, where it used to be you started at Camp 3 on 1.
Yeah.
So, if you double up the oxygen, or quadruple it by doubling the flow, starting lower, that gives you a much better chance. And finally, the ratio of more Sherpas climbing with you. Just because you have somebody climbing in front of you or behind you, that doesn't make you go faster or slower, but it does give you an element of psychological security. And I think that for very inexperienced climbers, that is a game changer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So 5 people died on Everest in 2026, down from 8 in 2024 and 18 in 2023. And it's still, a good chunk below the long-term average. I think it is worth noting that most mountaineering and most Everest deaths happen on the descent after the summit, while they're still above 8,000 meters, the so-called death zone. One of the tests that I've used as a guide and with my climbing partners as well is just have people stand with and close their eyes, and that it's to measure whether or not their bodies can remain physically coordinated ataxia, because that part of the brain is very sensitive to lack of enough oxygen. So and the good thing about it is, if you're doing that, you don't have to move. You can just literally just close your eyes. They can't tell usually if they're weaving to and fro, but everyone else can see it. And it's just a very demonstrable, easy, quick test. So that's what I like on the ascent when people are struggling, because sometimes people are just having an off day. So this was a late season, as you alluded to earlier. The Khumbu Icefall, that was sort of dynamic section of the glacier between base camp and Camp 1, is the most dangerous part of the route, despite what I just said, because the icefall can collapse or people can fall in crevasses. And it nearly didn't open. Kind of walk us through what happened. There was a serac there. maybe start with what a serac is real quick and how that kind of affected the season.
Yeah, so this was unusual because the usual concern are the hanging seracs. A serac is just a huge ice cube, a huge collection of ice. And as you're going up the icefall from base camp to the climber's left, there's the west shoulder of Everest, and it soars thousands of feet. And there's this massive collection of ice that's just hanging there. And every single year, slivers of it calve off. Now, in 2014, it wasn't a sliver; it was a chunk. And there were 16 Sherpas waiting for the icefall doctors to repair a ladder near the football field, which is basically around the middle of the icefall. And they should have turned around. Some of the Western guides, as soon as they got notice of that, they told the Sherpas to turn around and get back down, get out of there. Other Sherpas stayed, and this thing collapsed on top of them. This year was different. This year, it was a 100 foot by 200 foot by 100 foot ice cube that was sitting there near the top of the icefall, but it wasn't vertical. It was leaning. At first, when the icefall doctors went up and they saw it, they couldn't go to the left of it because it was blocked. And they were afraid to go to the right of it because it was just literally teetering. And one day they said it was, there was a 1 foot gap. The next day it was 3 feet. The next day it was 8 feet. So this thing was moving. So the icefall doctors, fresh of that memory. And then even last year, there were 3 Sherpas who fell through the top of the icefall. It was like a dome that was there was an air bubble, and they broke through that, and those 3 died. So while technically the icefall is not the most dangerous place, it's where a lot of deaths happen because there's been around 70 or 80 deaths in the icefall out of the 320. So to your point, Steve, more people die higher up on the mountain than mostly on the descent. But with this big ice cube sitting there, the icefall doctors, they used drones to fly over to try to scout alternate routes. They went up, they did everything they could possibly do, but it went on day after day after day until it got to 2 weeks. And then Ming Maji, who is famous for his impatience, also famous for his incredible skill. He was on the team that summited K2 in the winter for the first K2 winter summit. But Ming Maji said, "I've had enough of this." And so he sent 4 of his Sherpas and also Bartek, the Polish skier that we should talk about and give a lot of love to. They went up and they found a route. and they put in some rope near Camp 1, but then a whiteout came and they had to, turn around and go back down. But basically, they opened a route. And then, so all of a sudden, the icefall doctors went up to Camp 1. They went to Camp 2. And so now, it was routes open. So now Sherpa started bringing up all the gear to Camp 2. They were using drones to ferry pickets and rope up to fix the summit from Camp 2 to the summit. And then for some unknown odd reason, claiming national security, the Nepal government banned the use of using drones. And so which was really bad because these drones were also carrying trash back down. Mm-hmm. Luckily, 5 days later, somebody woke up and said, wait a minute, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. So they reversed that ban. So this is part of the cryptic aspect of the season. Things were happening and they weren't happening. And, there were delays and there weren't delays. So what the big impact of that was that a lot of teams went and acclimatized instead of going to Camp 1 and Camp 2 and Camp 3 to acclimatize. They went to the trekking peaks of Mira and Island and Lobuche. And some actually even moved their base camp to these mountains, like climbing the 7 summits. My camel, they completely set up a Mira base camp. I think it was on Mira, and they literally spent the nights on the summit there. So they got acclimatized to the equivalent of Camp 2. So once the route got to the summit, man, nobody did a traditional acclimatization because they were already acclimatized to 7,000 meters, and then plus using supplemental oxygen to higher flows, lower rates, lower elevations. The season just once they got the ropes to the summit, I mean, and again, that was a massive effort because it's jet stream. It kept coming in and going out, coming in and going out, and it became very unpredictable. My good friend Chris Tomer is a meteorologist, and he gives weather reports, and Michael Fagan and Mark DeKeyser, they all said, the jet stream was just really erratic this year. It kept coming and going, and that stopped the summit rope fixers for about 4 or 5 days. And so all of a sudden people started getting more nervous again, like they were when the route wasn't through the icefall. So it was this kind of on again, off again season. But once they got the ropes to the summit, there was two Norwegians, 1 Sweden, and 3 Chinese that were fast followers to the rope team. And they summited on the same day that the ropes got to the summit. The rope fixers don't like that. They don't like to have people behind them because, they're kicking stuff down, and, there's lots of problems with that. But, and then the icefall, the jet stream came back. So nobody summited, and then again for like the next 4 days. And then we had that next week, the week of I guess it was the 17th. And that's when every single day people were going up.
The window opened.
Window opened right on schedule.
right on schedule. It is very unique in that way. Like, I don't, all the climbing I've done in the Himalaya, that's the only place where there's sort of this very reliable, kind of like clockwork every year sort of pattern. Most of the Himalaya is just affected by the normal meteorological, ups and downs of, good years and bad years. But that's a very, very interesting thing. It's just high enough and just hits exactly the right geography really relative to how our weather circulates the globe that it has this effect. So
and it doesn't happen in the Alps or the Karakoram or in Alaska or down in South America. I mean, those mountains are really hard to forecast, whereas Everest is relatively straightforward, or at least has been historically.
Yeah. Knock on wood. Last year we spent, I think, a total, we talked about it on this kind of recap show, but we also dedicated another 2 podcast episodes to the topic of a certain noble gas called xenon. And at the time, it was kind of a one-off experiment. And this was the year it was supposed to become more of a product. And we were going to see a lot of people using xenon. Alan, from what you can tell, what happened with xenon and the 4-day ascents of Everest in 2026?
I have not been able to find any public sources that didn't come from the operator who promoted it last year, Fruitenbach Adventures, to find anybody's name. I have not seen anybody claim they used it. I haven't even heard rumors or word of mouth. Lucas did put a lot of people, something like nearly 50 on the summit. He has multiple teams. He has the traditional team, and he has his flash team, which runs in 2 weeks, and others. And he has on his website that they were, I think it was from last year, that they were going to use xenon in 2026, but haven't been able to verify that. So I won't say that they didn't use it or they did use it. I simply don't know.
Yeah. And I reached out to Lucas and Martin. You talk to your athletes, and none of us are entirely clear.
What I see from my point of view is that the trend of the last years and seasons is towards the flash expeditions or rapid expeditions more and more. I think there is actually space for everybody to do their thing. But then the requirements of knowing how the acclimatization works and what is required, how to do the pre-acclimatization is, of course, increasing to do it right, because you're on Everest, you definitely need to be acclimatized. And I've heard several cases, or many cases, that it just didn't work. Different problems, pulmonary edema, relatively low, still on the mountain even before reaching the base camp. So, doing the pre-acclimatization at home or not on the mountain yet, it requires definitely a lot of knowledge. So I would recommend athletes to reach out to people who have that knowledge. You're putting a lot on the line, so your life and of course their success on the climb. But then I think Everest is still a tough climb. It's I think for me that's what I was observing even this year. Still a lot of people didn't succeed, didn't make it to the summit. It's again very hectic. It can be hectic due to the weather conditions, the ice fall. So there's a lot of this unpredictability. Also, even the north side closed actually in the last moment. So some of those athletes redirected to the south, which is then kind of a different route, but you still should be probably prepared for very much to the same level. But still, I think mentally it's not an easy task. I had some athletes like that. They were ready for the north, and then last minute and like, wow, okay, we go to the south, and I could see that it's disturbing, and you're ready for something, and all of a sudden it's changed. So I think then as I maybe can be redirected then to my perspective as a coach, how to be ready for Everest climb, of course, is not just about the physical capacity, but that's the one where you can change the most with physical training, with right preparation and how long it takes. But then the acclimatization and other techniques to be able to succeed. But I think also that mental capacity, the robustness to just be ready to face a lot of uncontrolled, the factors that you cannot control, like the weather, like the crowds waiting in the line, which it was quite spectacular to see. Some of the days were really busy. So I just think that simply nothing really prepares you for that. It's a very unique situation. And I definitely fit that in the preparation this year more than before, the mental readiness.
Yeah. And, I think Xenon promised to dramatically shorten people's time on the mountain, which there's a strong safety argument for spending less time in a risky environment. But drones are also trying to do the same thing specifically for the people who carry the loads through the places like the Icefall up to the upper mountain, or at least to Camp 2. And that, as you mentioned earlier, Alan, turned a little bit of an international incident this year. I just want to hear about this sort of technology. I think there's both a technology story, there's also a money story in this. And how did this kind of unfold? Why use drones on Everest? And how much can they actually do?
Yeah, so it actually started maybe, 3 or 4 years ago during the COVID closures, that the Chinese were using it extensively to remove trash, these drones. And then a Nepali company bought a couple last year and experimented with it. One of them crashed in the ice fall. But these things are like $80,000, and they have a payload of something like 60 pounds, but they only use half of that because of the altitude. But I guess when you have an $80,000 drone, it should come with a parachute, which it does. So when the rotors stopped, the parachute deployed, and so they were able to get the drone back out of some crevasse in the ice fall. But they're using it mainly as a way of offloading the Sherpas and reducing the number of trips that they go through the icefall. That's on the ascent. So they're carrying up, pickets and screws and rope. They're just attaching it to the bottom in a net, and some guy's sitting at base camp, and he's just, they've got cameras on, so they're just flying them up and then dropping them off at Camp 1. So it's really straightforward. And then once it gets to Camp 1, then they've got some rice bags filled with trash, and they just attach it to the drone and it carries back down to base camp for proper disposal. And that was actually, everybody was really excited about that this year. Mm-hmm. Then there was this American company that also brought over some drones, and apparently somebody in the Ministry of Tourism, or perhaps it was Defense, they raised the question about what happens if they lose control of the drone and it flies into a human. Who's liable for that? And then it was like, okay, we're right on the Chinese border, and so we are not allowed to fly into China. What happens if somebody loses control? So there was this myriad of arguments that caused, like I said earlier, for the authorities to say, okay, no more drone flights. And this was during that delay period that I was talking about earlier. So then people were saying, wait a minute, if we can't use drones, which was going to kind of be a shortcut for us, especially in a situation, the scenario like this that developed of delays, then, come on, let's get real. And so the government reversed itself. And so they did allow drones then to carry, mainly rope fixing gear up into the Khumbu, the Western Khumbu, and bring trash back down.
And it was just to Camp 1? Or were they able to go ahead?
I'm not 100% sure, Steve, but I'm 80% sure it was just a Camp 1 because of the, it's another 2,000 feet, 19.5 to 21.5. So you're around 6,500 meters.
And maybe you can describe this a little bit because I've not been there myself, but my understanding is Camp 1 is a lot like an advanced base camp, and there's cook staff often there, and like there's quite a bit of infrastructure at Camp 1.
That would be Camp 2. Camp 2 is technically advanced base camp. Camp 1 is more of a way station for on your first acclimatization. You spend the night there because you're going from 17.5 at base camp to 19.5, and then you spend 2 nights there. One night, just resting from the icefall climb, and the next day you have an active rest day where you go up halfway. And then most teams today then move to Camp 2 and stay there for 3 or 4 days. They may go up to 7,000 meters in the Lhotse face for acclimatization, and that's it. I mean, in the old days, when I climbed it, we went up to Camp 1 and back down. We went back to Camp 1, then we went to Camp 2, and then we went back down, and we went back to Camp 1, Camp 2, Camp 3, back down. So we had like at least 3 rotations through it. These days, most people just do 1 because they're using the supplemental oxygen and they're acclimatizing at home, as Martin described, and they're acclimatizing on the trekking peaks of mainly Lobuche. So those 3 factors have to completely change the schedule. And that's part of why it's very rare that a company will run 2 months expedition. You arrive at, May 1st, you leave on June 1st. Almost nobody does that now. Madison Mountaineering had a 2-week climber. We mentioned Fruitenbach had a 2-week expedition. Adrian Bollinger regularly runs 2 to 3 weeks in the north. So 4 to 5 weeks has now become the average. So it's been 3 weeks that's been shaved off.
Interesting. Yeah. So the drone is sort of like an inexpensive helicopter. It's just doing this work, and it's replacing the risk of moving humans up and down through that hazardous area. Is it displacing workers that want that job, do you think? Or what is the, there's always a sort of and I think this is a big topic these days, the human cost of technological advancement, right? Like you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Drones are here. We're going to use them. Right. What are the consequences and who owns the repercussions of those consequences?
Well, the obvious casualty would be Sherpas, because they get paid by the load, and they get paid not only how much weight they carry, but how many times they will carry a load to a camp. So, but I have not heard an outcry saying that drones are going to take away my job, because most Sherpas, they've lost family, friends, relatives, brothers, fathers, to casualties within the icefall. So, it's dangerous enough, climbing up the Lhotse face and the southeast ridge and second step, much less having to go through this, this ice cube.
Is this just a prelude to the drones doing all of the carrying and moving all of the gear to each of the camps, and just as sort of the step 1 of the technology if we peer into the future?
So there's been a lot of request to have helicopters, not drones, because a helicopter can carry 1 load, will take multiple drone trips to do. And the Nepal government is slowly coming around to that. This year, once the delays went in, they did authorize helicopters to fly gear to Camp 2, which might have been why the drones only went to Camp 1. But, a helicopter can carry tons of stuff.
Sure.
And if you look at you look at the base camp and where they've got sofas, literally, sofas you would buy from a furniture store in a big dome round tent, that sofa was carried up by a helicopter, not on the back of a porter or on a yak. So helicopters are already playing a pivotal role in making, bringing the luxuries, to camp. Hey, one thing about the drones, which is really interesting, I was talking to Dan Richards. He's the CEO of Global Rescue. They're probably the dominant evacuation company worldwide. And I was talking to him mainly about this insurance fraud that's been going on, mainly in trekking, not climbing Mount Everest, but with trekkers getting poisoned by putting eye drops in their water bottle, or putting baking soda or something, and then they get upset stomach. They start throwing up. They say, "Oh, you need to have a helicopter rescue out." So, they fly them back to Kathmandu, and the trekking guy calls their uncle, who's the helicopter pilot, who calls his brother, who's the doctor at the hospital. So there's this whole thing. About 80 people have been indicted by the Nepal FBI on this scheme. So I was talking to Dan Richards about all of that, and again, I need to emphasize that this is all trekking, not Mount Everest guides poisoning Mount Everest climbers. That was the bait click headline that you read, 100% inaccurate. I'm talking to Dan Richards about all of this. And I said, any chance that you'll use drones instead of helicopters to help evacuate people in the future? So think about that. Now you got a drone. You're long lined to a drone, or you're put into a net with a drone. And he said they have seriously talked about it. The technology is not quite there yet to be reliable and to carry a 250-pound person with gear, or maybe they don't gear, but bringing down a 150, 200-pound person. But that might be something that we see 3, 5, 7 years from now.
Absolutely. So let's answer the question everyone types into Google. How much does it cost to climb Mount Everest in 2026 or in 2027 for that matter?
So I always write this annual article about that, and I go and I survey all the guides. I talk to Nepali guides and Western guides, and I get their prices and stuff. And then I have the mother-all spreadsheets where I do, standard deviations and calculations and medians and averages. $50,000. That's what it was this year. That was the median. But it ranged from the poly companies, they will discount, they will bargain with you. So you could get it for $30,000 for like base camp only services, all the way up to what like Seven Summits Treks calls their VIP. So 2 V's. So it's really important. That might be
very important person.
Very, very. So that might be, 250,000. Wow. And then you might have a one-on-one with a world famous climber like a Nimrall or a Kenton Cool, and that could run you 500,000 to $1 million. So it is all over the map. And just like that in airlines where, you can fly across the Atlantic for $1,000 or $25,000, depending upon where you want to sit on the airplane.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with, with mountaineering now. And that's not unique to Everest. That's all around the world. There are companies that are really ratcheting up the luxury side of it. But the permit price went from $11,000 to $15,000, and you really didn't get anything more for it, except the government got, they've made an extra, however many, 500 times 4,000 was. They got that extra money. And, but I predicted last year, I didn't think it was going to have a material impact on the crowds. And sure enough, we had record crowds this year. So I think what had more of a material impact was the 7,000 meter rule. So whenever you want to talk about that.
If you've been wondering whether one-on-one coaching is the right next step for your training, this is the month to find out. Sign up for coaching and receive a free 30-minute call with one of our specialists. Visit uphillathlete.com to learn more. Now, back to that show.
I want to talk about whether or not you can train for Everest. So this is the question that gets typed into Google that brings a lot of people to Uphill Athlete is, asking how to train for Everest. They want to hear that it's a certain, magic exercise or something. How fit they need to be, how to measure their fitness to know they are fit enough to climb Everest, how fit they need to be to climb Everest without oxygen, these kinds of things. So Martin, why don't you start with this? Let's start with this question. How long does it take to prepare physically for climbing Everest? Like, what's the honest answer?
Ideally, I would say at least 1 year, but that's of course, that's relative, of course, to what you've been doing
right?
all those years before. It always depends in endurance coaching, endurance training. So, that's always the first, maybe one of the first tasks to see where the athlete is when we start working together and coaching him or her. So, start where we are and how long do we have? And so how long do we have is really kind of the knowledge we have about how long it takes for the body to adapt to training. And so we take it from there, right? So we have now many athletes approaching us in October, which is like 7 months before the climb. So, I mean, it's not ideal, but we have to do our best. And usually these athletes, they are serious. They have been doing some training, some form of training, right? So then it's really not wasting any time, do the testing to see where they are, making sure that they know their intensity zones, they know what to do, and setting up some volume and then take it from there. The more ideal version is that the athletes approach us 2 years even before, and they say, okay, I have this plan. I want to climb some big mountains and eventually Everest. That's of course much better. We have some time. We have time to figure it out. We have time for multiple big blocks, the macro cycles, not the micro or mesocycles, actually the big year cycles, and evaluate, assess, see how actually they respond. Everybody responds a bit differently and need more time. But it really depends. But again, most of these athletes, there needs to be sometimes a reality check that I'm sorry, but we don't really have much time here, and you're not in a great shape, to be honest, for this big climb. So I would recommend taking more time, because you want to be safe. You want to enjoy the climb, and you might just simply not make it. So that's.
I talk to a lot of these people on the phone or on Zoom, and I sort of say there's a couple of things I always say. I always say like exercising is not training. That people are like, oh yeah, I'm playing tennis or I'm doing this. I'm like, well, that's not the same as structured training, where you're improving your fitness over time using proven, well understood methodologies. It takes about 10 years of structured training to realize your genetic potential as an endurance athlete on average. And if you're older, it takes, that curve maybe a little steeper on the backside of it. So, I really encourage people to start at least a year. We're really, really pushing for that now as much as we can. Another question people want to know is how fit they actually need to be. And they want a number, they want a VO2 max or a chronic training load score. Why is that? Is that the right question to ask? And if so, why?
I think it's natural that people just want to quantify it, and they just want to see, am I there, or what does it take for me to get there? So none of those like VO2max or lactate threshold speed or the CTL in training peaks are wrong. They definitely represent something, right? Like a sum of something. And so our maximum aerobic capacity. But one number, again, there's no one number that will tell you, will you or not make it? Are you actually fit in that specific, in those specific factors that you need? With CTL, I think there is definitely a lot of power in that number, because it represents the accumulated volume of training per months, the last months of the training you've done so far. So there is definitely some power, but it all depends also what you did to increase that CTL, right? So there needs to be, of course, a minimum amount of aerobic volume, because that represents the time that the body was adapting and making you stronger. And you might have been doing that cycling, so that's great general fitness. But when you go up the hill or down the hill with big boots, with weight, not sure that it's going to help you. So I think that what I've been coming to in the last seasons was setting up a list of factors that I consider really important. So they are physical, and they are then more like tied to the physical, like nutrition, breathing techniques, breathwork training, acclimatization, of course, and others. But I think one number that I sort of look at quite often in a training peaks with my athletes and myself included is how fast can you go up the hill. So basically the work, so the potential energy, whatever, the physics behind it. But I think it's a great proxy. It kind of tells me quickly where the athlete is. It's really visible on training peaks, where it's the VAM number, You can set it up on your Garmin or watches that you have with GPS. You can see it live then when you go up the hill. Also, you can calculate it, estimate it on treadmills based on the incline and the speed of the treadmill. So that's what I'm watching with the intensity of the heart rate and seeing how much elevation gain the athlete can cover in a time. And that gives me some idea of how fast they are moving. And they can sustain that speed and in the fresh state, in the fatigued state. So that gives me an idea of, okay, that you're great when you're doing 1 hour session, but actually the climb will take many, many hours, right? So what happens then? So that's what we're trying to build, especially in the most specific stage, the 4 or 5 months before, because ultimately that will help the most. And also muscle endurance, the strength requirements, that is, of course, for the uphill, for the downhill, that also links to the fatigue resistance. So actually, basically, it's complex. It's not one number. One number will never give you an answer to, am I ready? Am I fit for Everest?
Yeah. I think it's true that most people are going to need 1 to 2 years of structured training to climb Everest, not a few months. And the biggest determinant of success is going to be having spent the time to build a deep aerobic base that is built mostly with easy zone 2 training. And plus, of course, the climbing experience to be able to efficiently move up the mountain and make good decisions when you're there. Let's ask you, Alan, what is the experience, sort of the apprenticeship that you recommend people have before they step onto a mountain like Everest?
Yeah, I fully agree with everything that Martin said. Here in Colorado, I tell people that they start, most of our mountains that are 14,000 foot mountains, they start the base camp or the hike trailhead is at 9,000 feet. And so I'd like to see them do 1,500 feet an hour. And, make that consistent. So that'd be 300 meters, at a 4,000 meter mountain. And I tell them if they can do that continuously and then, go do back-to-back training sessions. If they go, they do a 5-hour climb to get to the top of a 14er. When you get back down to your car, get some water, get some calories, do it again. And then, do that and then do it again the next day. And so what I'm looking for with them, so kind of my KPI, my key performance indicator is the recovery time. And I ask them to rate themselves on a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is that, I could do it again. I could do it a third time. And 10 is that I need to go to the emergency room, And so what you do is if you do this over a year and you do a back-to-back once a month and you track yourself, then you should see that recovery index. And it's totally quantitative. I mean, it's quantitative. It's a simple question. How do you feel?
Yeah. Yeah.
Throw away your watch, throw away your, everything else, throw away anything that's got a battery in it, and just ask yourself in a private moment, how do I feel? And just be honest with yourself. That, to me, that's the best indicator that you can possibly get. But I have people come to Summit Coach that I love that line that exercising is not training. That, they say, I play pickleball, twice a week. Well, good. Keep it up, But now let's add some real training in there.
Yeah.
And for me, I take a very holistic approach to it. And I ask people to, work on their mental toughness, their emotional stability, and then their physical strength. And it's the lower body, it's the core. Those are the key areas for me. The upper body, I always use Alex Honnold as my role model. That he's kind of a skinny guy, but he's an ant. He is disproportionately strong for the size of his muscle in his bodies, and so part of that, a lot of that comes from his holistic approach of training the mind, the emotions, and then also the physical strength. But I have people come to me all the way from great athletes that are running marathons. That I've got a 70-year-old client, and his VO2 max is in the 99th percentile. And then I've got other people where their heart rate variation is, in the single digits. It's a miracle they're alive. So, and for most people, I refer them to you guys for the physical training because, just like Martin's, you guys are you're the experts in the field.
What about the on mountain experience, kind of the climbing apprenticeship?
So that is a continuum. I always suggest I start off with a one-on-one intro to mountaineering with an IFMGA guide. So that is just the two of them. Teach them that crampons have a left and a right foot. How to double back your harness. What are the 4 basic knots that you need? What's pressure breathing, rest up? How do you take an efficient break? How do you pack your pack so 80% of the weight is on your hips, not your shoulder? So that one-on-one day. So if you don't know anything, go get some basics to begin to develop good practices. Don't just rely upon your buddy. I've never been a good skier because the first time I ever went skiing, I taught myself. And I taught myself all the bad habits. They've stuck with me for life. So I'm never going to be a good skier, so never do it. And so, if you want to be a bad climber, then, just climb with your friends and don't get any professional training. So number 1, intro to mountaineering with an IFMGA guide. Number 2, go take a class like on a Rainier or a Mont Blanc, from, again, a truly trained IFMGA guide that you're going to actually be on the snow. You're going to learn how to, the footwork, the crampon steps, all that stuff. Then you begin a series of climbs, in basically 4, 5, 6, 7,000 meter climb. So go to Peak Lenin, go to Himlung, go to Aconcagua for the 7,000s, go to Ecuador for the 6,000s, Kyrgyzstan for some of the 6,000. The world's full of mountains that go to this gradation. And then ideally, before you go to Everest, I want to see people go to Manaslu or Choyol. Because the problem is that for most of my clients, they don't know what they don't know. And the only way to know is to stick your nose in it. And, if you go and you don't summit, there are incredible lessons that come from that. It's not a failure. It's a non-summit. It's only a failure if you don't learn from it. But, I like to see people go to those 8,000 meter mountains before they try Everest. Because, I always say 2 things about altitude. One is it's random. One time you'll do great. The next time you won't. And it's exponential. So you may say, well, I did Kili and I did great on Kili. I didn't even breathe hard. Good. Proud of you. Way to go. That's 20,000 feet. You got 9,000 more to go.
Yeah.
And again, you don't know what you don't know. And it's not a linear curve. It's an exponential curve.
It's so true. It's such a difference between even 7,000 and 8,000 or even 6,500 meters and 7,000 meters. It is an exponential curve. Martin, what are you telling people to do in terms of their apprenticeship? Anything to add to Alan's description, or is that a pretty good track?
I think it's pretty good. Yeah, I agree with that. It's the technical aspect. It's the acclimatization. As much as we learn, the more that we learn, the better. Yeah, how you handle altitude. Aconcagua is great in terms of like if you get to that almost 7,000 meter altitude without supplemental, then it's a good test because it's easy terrain, and then you will be doing that. Probably now a bit lower, as Alan, you said that people start supplemental oxygen on Everest in much lower now, Chem 2, maybe even lower sometimes. So but still, I think it's great to test the body, test the capacity. And but I think the trend is maybe just that people are sort of rushing it, and not everybody. Again, not everybody, but they want to skip. They don't want to go to the 8,000 meter peaks. But I do recommend it. Yeah. I think also just taking the time. I know that some people really want to do like Denali in spring, 8,000 or like Manaslu, Choyu in September, and then Everest. I'm like, calm down, because the mental space it takes and energy, like they burn out. I often see that, if they just go one after one another, it backfires seriously. So I usually just try to keep them patient and just use my examples from my athletic career. Is like, it takes years, and it's actually the enjoyable part. Like that's the journey. Yeah. And but anyway, back to Everest and what to climb. I think more the better. Denali is great also, even though it's relatively lower. But it's a great, like, technical, different aspects, but still a big physical effort, big expedition. And I think it's also one of the great prerequisites or, kind of check-ins, whether you're ready. But I think, and Himalaya and Nepal also, that experience in the country, I think it also helps. If you go to Khumbu and what to expect, maybe that helps.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. I want to segue to the kind of future of Everest and circle back on the predictions we made here last year. But one of the ways I wanted to do that is call out an incredible accomplishment this year, which also is really interesting that Everest was skied for the second time without the use of supplemental oxygen in just 2 years. Last year, it was already incredible. And one of the things that has so often happened with incredible firsts is there's no second for like decades after because someone's done it. It's like, wow, yeah, that kind of takes the allure off. But Bartek Ziemkiewicz, I believe I'm saying that right, a Polish mountaineer and skier, not only skied off of Everest without supplemental oxygen, but also skied off of Lhotse without supplemental oxygen, did the full descent. So I think that was for me personally, that was kind of the highlight of the Everest season is seeing that go down and just see somebody who's obviously there doing it for the love of it, not because he really cares about the record. Like if he's first or second or 10th, like that guy obviously just like wants to be there and doing what he's doing. And I always love to see that.
Lhotse, he went up before the ropes were put in and he basically soloed. I mean, he was 100% alone. He summited Lhotse and he skied back down 100% alone, no O's. I mean, just astounding.
That was the highlight of the season for me. Yeah. Just seeing the video, like the raw video of no ropes and the beautiful couloir, and wow, this is Lhotse. Nobody there, so it was really
nobody
amazing.
there, and fourth highest mountain in the world, if I remember right, and like skiing off of the top. Like I've been to 8,000 meters a few times. That is hard. I mean, and I haven't been as high as Lhotse, so I can only imagine. Like, and a lot of people have asked me over the years about skiing off of 8,000 meter peaks. And I've always sort of said, like, I don't think it actually makes that much sense most of the time because most of the time the snow isn't very good. It's icy. The wind, it's very, very windy at those altitudes. So the snow is all compacted and thrown around by the wind, and it's not going to be great skiing. And you're going to have to carry the ski, like you're kind of handicapping yourself by carrying all the stuff up and then like using it on the way down. It's most of the time faster to just walk down or climb down. But, seeing these guys, Bartek this year and all the skiers last year, it was really cool to see, them doing that on their terms and making it look great and, terrifying, but great.
Yeah, I think it's just like that there's still space for everyone to show up and have an experience. So I think the next day that there was a fixed line, I think it will be impossible for him to do any turns, and it was so narrow. Almost the skis didn't fit. So imagine. Yeah. So that was cool.
So last year when we were here, Alan, you said, and I quote, "I think we're going to see a lot more first ascents of unclimbed mountains in the Himalaya, commercialized first ascents." And you also said that we're going to see more people on Everest, and you suggested that if they go through with their proposal to require people to have a 7,000 meter summit in Nepal that they've climbed, that they're going to see the Everest numbers cut in half. And you predicted that the permit prices were going to go from $11,000 to $15,000 and that was not going to have a measurable impact. You're absolutely right on that one. It seems like actually, as you pointed out, like it was a record year. So if anything, it was a to people that didn't seem bothered. What happened to the 7,000 meter requirement?
It is hung up in Nepal's government. They have two chambers. They have an upper chamber and a lower chamber. It passed the upper chamber, which is equivalent to like the United States Senate. And then the larger lower chamber, which is equivalent to like the House of Representatives. We have more individual representatives from all throughout Nepal, has not not past that chamber. And my understanding is that there is some serious consideration to changing the wording around the 7,000 meter requirement. So remember, this is called a tourism bill, and it's 2081. You can go to the website, you Google Nepal Tourism Bill 2081, and you can actually see a tracker of where it is in the process. But my understanding, it's a big tourism bill. I mean, it covers casinos and gambling and mountain climbing and taxis, everything. But the big pushback has been nobody's pushing back on the 7,000 meter requirement. What people are pushing back on is in Nepal only. So in other words, you could have summited K2 and not a 7,000 meter mountain in Nepal and not be eligible for an Everest permit. And if you say it like that, I don't know anybody that would say, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And then you get into what's the motivation here? Is it really behind safety and increasing people's experience, or is it a revenue generating? And the problem with that argument is that the trekking peaks, those permits are hundreds of dollars. So you'd have to have thousands of people to generate any meaningful revenue for the country. So then you just say, the common sense thing is to make it any mountain, and maybe it's not even set 7,000 meters, maybe it's 6,500 meters. I personally would like to see it be 8,000 meters anywhere in the world, and that would narrow it down to 3 countries. But 7,000 meters anywhere in the world, and maybe you throw in a few climbs by name, by exception, like Amada Blam, Denali, Aconcagua, Peak Lennon, which is over 7,000 anyway. But, maybe you have a short list of acceptable climbs, not just make it an altitude. So my understanding is that discussion is going on. There was a big meeting that was held around June 1st of a lot of notoriety people, whatever it is, that it was held in Kathmandu to discuss all of this. The Sherpa community came out real strong, kind of talking about the lack of experience in the mountain, the lack of training for the Sherpas. The Khumbu Climbing Center is doing a great job of training a lot of Sherpas. But just like this year, the gentleman that got drafted to be a guide then ended up getting left behind and basically self-rescued. It is an amazing story. But word had it that he didn't even know how to use a stove, a gas stove. And then there was a story of about 5 or 6 years ago of Tanji Sherpa that was with a Pakistani military, older gentleman in his 60s, refused to turn around, ran out of oxygen. Tanji gave him his oxygen. They both ended up collapsing right below the summit. They were both rescued by other Sherpas. But this young man, he was a porter. He'd never even been on Everest. And he ended up tragically losing all 10 fingers to frostbite. So it's stories like that, and the one of this year that causes the Sherpa community to say enough is enough, and it's being led by some pretty high-powered people, like Kamirita Sherpa, who got his record 30-second summit at age 56. And people like Andorje, who was with Hall and Ball back in 96 and been working for Adventure Consultants ever since then. He got his 25th summit this year. So the Sherpa community, I think, is beginning to speak up. Last time I saw this happen in earnest was after the 2013 Manaslu avalanche, which killed around 13 people, I think, somewhere in that neighborhood, that the Sherpas said, we got to change this. And what changed then was that they began to form their own companies. And so that's where companies like Seven Summits Trek and Elite and 8K Expeditions, it was Asian Trekking was really the dominant in-country firm. But now we've got, I think there's 2,000 registered trekking companies. And again, Nepal has no requirements for being a mountain guide, unlike in the U.S. where the National Park Service gives out concessions. Same thing in Europe, in the Alps. You've got some really high bars that who can guide, who can call themselves a guide. So Nepal has an opportunity to clean things up. So if I was going to make a prediction for the future, and unfortunately, I have said this way too often that I think this was the year that things will change. I thought the 18 deaths was the Rubicon. I thought we weren't going back. And instead, what I keep seeing is that a lot of the bad practices are codified. by the unwillingness of the guides to make changes that would put revenue at risk. But maybe this year will be different. Maybe through this bill, the difference between this bill and everything else we've ever seen is those things, they show up in Nepali newspapers. Mm-hmm. And it's not law, and there's no way to enforce it. And so it's an idea. This is a law.
Right. Yeah, and everybody will know it's a law. We went through a process where everybody had a chance, at least the interested parties had a chance to voice their opinions and weigh in. So they had some opportunity to shape it. So that's if those people are taking advantage of that, it sounds like, which is good. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's,
and I think it will go through. I think it'll be 7,000 meters anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
That's my forecast.
Okay. Great. Well, we're going to check in on that forecast next year. One of the things that you said last year was that you thought there was going to be more commercialized, like other ascents outside of Everest, and that didn't happen. I don't think that I've seen anything like that. And when you said that, I bit my tongue because I tried to do that for years, sell those kinds of trips. And it's very difficult because there's such a small pool of people that are actually capable of partnering with a guide to do a real climb. And then you're like, yeah, we're going to do this thing. It's going to be harder. It's going to be more expensive. And by the way, we only have like a 20% chance of actually doing this.
Other than that.
So there's just, it's just hard to make all those things line up. And I feel like it's needed, to your point. And I think one of the things I think all of us would like to see, and I think what other things I like to imagine is the intent of the 7,000 meter in Nepal requirement is to just spread out the traffic across more mountains and take that pressure off of those few highly trafficked, the Meras, the Amidablams, and push it out to some other places, because there's plenty of beautiful mountains in Nepal that would be excellent venues for mountaineering, and they're just a little, like, the logistics are a little complicated, or they just haven't. They're a little out of the way. They're a little expensive. They're a little unknown. Whatever the thing is, and so people don't go to them. So
I will say
anywhere else in the Himalaya, nobody would pay any attention to it, but because of where it is, like, hundreds of people climb it every year.
One of the things I'll say about the commercialization of unclimbed peaks is that there are companies like Climbing the Seven Summits and Garrett Madison and a few Nepali companies that attach that as an option to a standard climb of like an Amitablam or K2 or an Aconcagua. They'll say, we're going to go do a acclimatization on an unclimbed peak. So they're not offering it as a standalone climb, but they're offering it as an option to an existing one. And that kind of mitigates some of that, the business model aspects of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So, Martin, what are your predictions for 2027? I'm going to pin you down. Last year you dodged the question, but this year we're going to get you on the record.
Oh, did I? Wow. I think that things will be improving in all aspects. I think they are, but hopefully maybe more regulations to some extent. I think many of these big names in Sherpa community, the leaders, let's call them, they've been asking for it. I think for everybody's well-being and safety, it would be beneficial. But what that looks like, I'm not sure exactly. Reducing the numbers, I'm not sure. The mountain will still dictate the rules, the weather, the jet stream. I think that's not going to change. The conditions seem to be just getting drier and drier. As I was there, I think 2 years ago in March, there was no snow, which was really surprising to me. It was kind of winter, and the locals told me that it hasn't snowed properly in winter in 10 years. So it's scary. But I think otherwise, people will hopefully seek more coaching and guidance, to prepare properly, to know what they're doing, and hopefully China will open for Westerners. So I think it can be. So I had definitely a large number of athletes that would prefer to go to the north side. Otherwise,
Do you think
no, I
they're
think
going
just
to
go-
pass the 7,000 meter requirement?
yeah. I don't know. Honestly, I thought it was already passed, but it doesn't seem to be. But I agree with Alan. I think that actually including Ahmedabad, for example, it stands there like it's 6,900 meters almost. And so technically it's very much more technical than anything on the south side on the normal route. I would say that it passes the requirement, and other mountains in the world, or the 7,000ers in Pamir Mountains in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. I think that's Tajikistan, Piklanyin and stuff. So I think that makes sense, but also actually to spread the people around Nepal, the other parts of Himalayas. I think that maybe is their goal, and I don't think that's bad. It's actually beneficial for the people, and so it doesn't need to be only Khumbu, but Khumbu Valley. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to take the other side of this bet, and I'm going to say that they're not going to pass a 7,000 meter requirement. And I'm going to go on the record saying that Tibet will be open next year for business. I could be wrong, but I'm going to put it out there. So, where can people follow your Everest coverage and reach you at Summit Coach, Alan?
Yeah, just the gateway is just go to alanarnette.com. So ALANARNETTE.com. And that's got links on the homepage to everything I do.
Great. And Martin, give us a little summary of what it's like working with you as a coach.
You can contact me through Uphill Athletes, and I like to look at your history, see where you are, test it, and then just talk about your climbing plans, to talk about what you've done so far. I like to talk about strategy, the climbs that will prepare you for your goal. I love it. I think I have a good knowledge about the seasons and the different mountains that have some specific factors that will help you ultimately for the bigger climbs. I think that's beneficial. And otherwise, come from sports science, so it's a science-based approach, and also mixed with my experience.
Yeah, and I think you're really good at this. I've seen you do this countless times, where really that assessment planning piece of really figuring out strengths and weaknesses and how to integrate, and not just physical, and how to integrate a plan that gets people to the mountain that is where they're ready. So if any of you want to understand how the world's highest mountains are really climbed, reach out to us here at Uphill Athletes. We do this every day, all day. You can find our training plans, our coaching. And if you get something out of this, please subscribe, hit that like button, and we'll be back next year with Alan and Martin to see if any of our predictions come true. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, real quick before you go, everything we publish, the articles, new podcast episodes, and the live webinars are announced first in our newsletter. You can elect to receive between 1 and 3 newsletters a month. They're written by myself and the coaching team. And if you want them, sign up at uphillathlete.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.